I guess I can do it. So my name is Adrian Coles. I know I see a few faces that I recognize. So for those that I don't recognize, I'm actually a statistical research scientist here at DCRI. Another interesting fact about myself that I think will really kind of tie into this talk is that I'm actually the first African American male to get a Ph.D. in statistics from North Carolina State University.
All right.
So thank you, I appreciate it. So taking the time to do these types of events and to really consider the contributions from all Americans is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. So again, thank you all for joining us today. I represent DCRI diversity, and let me tell you why I say that. I'm one of a very small handful of African American statisticians in our organization. I see another one here today too. But yeah, so I'm one of a very small handful of African American statisticians in our organization. And I really believe, I just said it a moment ago, but I really believe it's so important for us to pause from time to time to really recognize and to celebrate the contributions from all Americans, especially those Americans who have historically been undervalued and underappreciated. It's essential to us really cultivating the talent that is necessary to really drive tomorrow's innovation so that we can continue to really solve the current and emerging health challenges that we face around the world. So again, given that passion, it is my honor to welcome our speaker today and to introduce him. And so let me jump right into that. So producer Stephen Channing earned a Ph.D. from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and brings a distinguished career as historian and filmmaker to creating a fresh look at American stories. He is the founder of Dialog Inc. and is responsible for award-winning films such as the regional Emmy-winning Alamance, the civil rights classic February 1, Durham, a self-portrait, Change Comes Knocking, which addresses the war on poverty in North Carolina, Generation of Change, about the progressive tradition of Dr. Bill Friday and Terry Sanford, and Down Home, the story of Tar Heel Jews. So all of these documentaries are regularly broadcast on UNC TV and feature companion teachings as well. That's amazing. They feature these companion teaching guides distributed to schools statewide. So DCRI, please join me in welcoming this amazing man, Dr. Stephen Channing. Sir, we appreciate your work. Thank you.
How do I follow that? My goodness. Thank you. This is familiar territory to me. A lot of you know my wife, Nancy Clapp Channing, who worked here for 25 years in outcomes with Dr. Dan Mark. Happy to recognize her, and lots of friendly faces. So this is really going to be more of a movie night sort of experience. I'm reminded of the Chinese curse, which is to live in interesting times. Interesting meaning very challenging times, and I don't have to go into the politics of the situation, but we know that we're in a time of change, where people are really being forced to look at their values, forced to look at their own personal stories and how you all relate to each other. About close to 10 years ago, I did a film called Durham, a self-portrait. And I had a great time for a couple of years going around town, meeting people from many walks of life. Spent a lot of time here at Duke as well. So I want to show you some clips from that film. Some of you may have seen this. Hopefully you'll enjoy seeing it again. Others who haven't seen it will, again, hopefully enjoy what they see. And I guess my question really today is Durham really different from America, the rest of this country, or the rest of North Carolina? Our elections recently have shown a real divide between larger cities and smaller towns in rural North Carolina. I know that Durham likes to pride itself on having had a different history of race relations. of having had a more accommodating place for black business. Talk about Black Wall Street and those types of things. Is that really the fact of life for black folk who have lived generations here in Durham? Is it really a different place today? And one way of maybe measuring that is to take a look at where we've come from. So I'm going to start off showing you the initial 4 or 5 minutes of the documentary Durham Self-Portrait, which kind of sets the table for is it a myth or reality that Durham was a different, better place for its African American citizens? So I am going to try to get this going with no explosions. Yes. Where's the bottom?
I would say that the secret game is a kind of metaphor for black-white relations in Durham in the 40s and before, and perhaps for a period after that time. It could hardly be imagined that two basketball teams, one black and one white, could play in Durham in 1944. It is difficult to imagine. And here we are during the war. With a team from North Carolina College for Negroes meeting a team of basketball players from Duke. It was played on Sunday morning when most people who might have objected to it were in church. You see, it was kept very, very much a secret. I was here. I was teaching at North Carolina College, and I never heard of that game. Imagine in 1944, there were white schools and black schools. There were white churches and black churches. There was a white community and a black community. There was a white side of town and a black side of town. The twain did not meet, except under the most rigid and carefully defined circumstances. You go to a store and you bought your stuff and you left. You go downtown to pay your bills and you left. And the contact, the racial contact was minimal and it was well defined.
On a Sunday morning in 1944, a secret game was played in the Bull City, Durham, North Carolina. How had these teams come to meet behind the veil of segregation? And what does this tell us about the unique story of race in Durham? For in a way, the early history of Durham was a secret game, hidden even from itself. By the way, the North Carolina College Eagles whipped Duke's Navy med school team.
So the secret game was the metaphor I used to frame the story of race in Durham. Secret game meaning the accommodations and understandings that were reached at the high level, among the business leaders, the political leaders, both black and white, because of I think the unique character of the Duke family, who were not slaveholders, who were opposed to the Civil War, who supported Reconstruction, who were genuinely devout Methodists and saw that as part of God's plan for equality on earth. Because of the uniqueness, I think, of that family, I think they helped to work with an amazing group of black business leaders to create the North Carolina Mutual, to create Mechanics and Farmers Bank, to create a variety of institutions 120 years ago that made Durham really, at that time, a special place, a place where a young black aspiring, I don't know if they had statisticians then, could come and find work. It was a time when Ph.D.s in mathematics from Harvard or the University of Chicago had no chance of finding an academic position. But they found work here at Mutual. And many of them rose to become vice presidents and even president of the company. So the origins of Duke and the origins of the black relations were I think they were different because of the leadership. How much that affected folks in working class communities, well, there were jobs, there were tobacco jobs, textile jobs. But as John Hope has just shown us, whites and blacks live in separate worlds. So I'm going to flip forward in time here. And if I can figure out how to close this file. Dr. Channing. Oh, yes. I don't mind using the microphone. So we're going to jump ahead about 50 years from the story I just told you about the origins of the so-called secret game between black and white elites. We're going to skip ahead to take a look at some events in the 1960s and 70s. So this is very much part of our mythology and reality about race in America, that the 60s were a transformative period. A lot of you, I think, may have had the opportunity to see the new film that's been around downtown and across the country on James Baldwin. I think it's called I Am Not Your Negro. And I think it's fantastic that, there's a younger generation is being introduced to this amazing figure. And he's evoking, the tensions of that time. Those tensions existed in Durham as well, as black folks began with their white allies, mostly from Duke, to challenge Jim Crow. So there's an interesting event that took place downtown I want to share with you.
There's always the possibility of someone referring to you as, hey, you nigger, hey, you darky, what are you doing downtown? Why don't you go where you belong?
But there was a place downtown where any family could shop in dignity, white or black. Emmanuel Mutt Evans' popular United Department Store on West Main.
And I worked in the store, and I honestly remember so vividly a farmer coming into the store with loads of children of all sizes and shapes, and he was there to buy overalls, and he was there to buy shoes and shirts, and I would spend an hour and a half with him and fit them all up. I was like 11 years old. My father wanted me to work in the store to get the feeling of it and the rhythm of it and just the story of it.
The treatment that blacks had in his store, I think, meant so much to the community, and the way he treated. In those days, black people couldn't try on a lot of things, hats and things they couldn't try on. But in the Evans store, they were free. They were treated like everybody else.
Son Eli remembers the day the sheriff came in and told them to stop serving Negroes at the lunch counter.
And he said, I cannot do that. I cannot discriminate against clientele in my store. They are the people who come to our store. I won't do that. He said, I'm sorry, you'll have to do that or close the counter. And he called our lawyer in and he said, you know, the law says you can't serve people sitting down, but you can certainly serve them standing up. And so Dad removed all the stools from the counter. And we had the only integrated stand-up lunch counter in Durham on Main Street.
There's a writer at the time, Harry Golden, who called this vertical integration. Duke, however, was a place apart. I just said earlier, you know, the Duke family back in the 19th century, early 20th century, had a more progressive view, I guess, about the possibilities of white and black relations. By the 40s, 50s, as Duke really began to grow, it was not seen as a welcoming place by black people here in Durham. It was not accommodating to patients and certainly not to medical faculty and staff. There came a moment, however, when the challenges to the Jim Crow status quo finally reached the ivy-covered walls of Duke University. And it happened right here, pretty close to where we're sitting. So let me share a little story about that, a couple of stories. Okay, here I'm going to do something amazing. Let's see. Whoops. So I'm looking for, is our tech friend right outside there? Ta-da! He pops out from behind him. How do I get the disc? Let's see. Ah, there we go.
When the first black students arrived at Duke in the 60s, they still faced a racial divide.
And so when I got to Duke, what I was confronted with was extraordinary isolation. I mean, it was obvious from the very beginning that I was an anomaly, especially socially. In the dorm, I was an anomaly.
In 1969, following the assassinations of Dr. King and Robert Kennedy, Brenda Armstrong and other black students occupied the Allen Building, Duke's administrative center, under the cover of darkness and posted unconditional demands for a more diverse campus.
And I was sitting next to my very best friend, who died about a year ago now. And she said, you know, I know what it was like in the middle passage, because it was pitch black dark. I could just feel her, but I couldn't see her because it was so dark in there. And she asked me if I was scared, and I said, I'm terrified, but I'm not turning back.
Having made their dramatic statement, the black students soon exited the building peacefully. But hundreds of mostly white Duke students had surrounded the Allen Building to demonstrate solidarity, including a future Durham mayor, Wib Gully.
Certainly there were hundreds of policemen from Durham, as well as some of the Duke folks there. And then as the afternoon unfolded, of course, there were tear gassing to get into the building and break through the cordon and get up and get the students out of there. A pretty unfortunate, I think, violent kind of effort to quash this that the administration directed. And it was scary, because then you saw people really panicking and running to get away from tear gas, and some kids overcome by tear gas and collapsing. And as I'm trying to get away, watching some police officer actually draw their gun, and or two of them did, and scared to death about what might happen. But No shots were fired as far as I know, and we got away, and but then a pretty bitter aftermath to that.
I did it for myself. I did it for my parents. I did it for the students who haven't even come to Duke yet, because at some point Duke had to be stopped. So it was cataclysmic. It saved Duke, as far as I was concerned. We saved Duke.
Amidst continuing protests, quiet signs of progress had already emerged at Duke, initially at the medical center.
When I got here, there was only one problem, and that was a black-white problem. As a matter of fact, I was astonished when the intern had to accompany dead patients to the morgue. And I was amazed that there were 4 morgues. It was for black, white, male, female. I don't know what they thought could go on at that temperature, but that was a fact of life.
Dr. Charles Johnson was practicing at all-black Lincoln Hospital when Duke's longtime medical director, Dr. Eugene Stead, invited him to cross town and open a new chapter in the city's divided history.
He said, well, I'll invite you and your entire practice to move to Duke University Medical Center. I said, well, I'm not so sure my patients want to come to Duke. As you know, many of my patients hate Duke with a passion for all of the past bad deeds that have been visited upon them since they have come here. He said, I'm aware of that. I said, so I'd have to write each one of them individually and ask them what they want to do. If they agree to come, I will come. If they agree not to come, I won't come. If we agree to come, and any of us are humiliated because of our color, we are all leaving. We were not paid to be humiliated and dehumanized. Is that agreeable? Simple as that.
Never simple, but profoundly, the old whites-only Watts Hospital and Black Lincoln were eventually closed in favor of a new county regional hospital for all. With Lincoln Hospital now an abandoned relic of Jim Crow, the last play of the secret game took place in the very heart of Durham. White merchants struggled to save their declining businesses as shoppers flocked to new malls.
The plan was to redo a lot of the downtown. The Loop Road was a part of it, and there was some other things.
White and black leaders nationwide supported urban redevelopment plans that brought millions in federal dollars to spruce up downtowns and build new highways. In Durham, a new freeway was planned to speed traffic to and from the growing Research Triangle High-Tech Industrial Park, rising just east of the city.
We talked about getting rid of urban blight, and the program developed was what we call urban redevelopment. Urban redevelopment caused the change in the community, and in what we call in the areas for urban renewal, a lot of small businesses were wiped out.
As so many cities had done nationwide, Durham ran its freeway right through its oldest African-American community, historic Hayti.
Then a lot of the area just south of downtown was very much of a deep slum, and so we cleaned all that out. But that caused a lot of consternation, particularly with the black community, because part of that area that we took out was the black business area that had been a place where several successful black businesses had been in place and had done well, but so that caused some problems.
Whatever the intentions, the impact was devastating. Hayti was wrecked, and the secret game of elite decision-making was dead.
I think the whole program of the Redevelopment Commission was partly to eliminate the competition for downtown, partly. And it was by design, not by accident. And because of all of the places that they could run an expressway, they ran through the middle of 100 and some businesses.
See, a lot of people lament the fact that Hayti is gone. Well, I got enough sense to know that Hayti would have been gone anyway. Time would have taken care of Hayti. And because the businesses that were successful were businesses that were successful because of segregation. Without segregation holding it up, those businesses would have gone.
You all know the name of the great leader here in the city for many years, Ann Atwater. She, oh, I'm supposed to use my mic. Ann Atwater's response was, well, we could get over to Duke Hospital faster now from East Durham. But the consequences were ones that we're still really wrestling with. The cost side of desegregation, the cost side of integration. These businesses existed in an artificial universe where black folks could not or would not, because they weren't treated well, go and shop in the main street stores and department stores. And so in that atmosphere, there arose the North Carolina Mutual. It became the world's largest black-owned business in its heyday in the 20s, teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. Great building, new building built in the 1960s. Now the Mutual occupies, I think, 1 or 2 floors of that building. That kind of, to me, symbolizes the challenges that black business people have had since the end of segregation. So things are never, I almost said black and white, but there's always, confusion as social change, sweeps through a community. I want to pause for a minute and maybe stop talking and stop showing. I have one last clip to show, a short clip at the end of the film. Maybe looking for reactions to what you've seen about Durham in its heyday as a unique and welcoming place for black business and education, the realities of life in the Jim Crow era and the challenges to that, and the situation as you live it today here in Durham. I think a lot of people, since I made this film about 8 or 9 years ago, I've begun to wonder whether I have been a tool for perpetuating something of a myth about Durham. As we work with and have good friends who are working with issues of poverty, the inequality of schooling, we all know that Durham is not, heaven on earth for black folks or brown folks. And so I began to question, well, really, what was the reality of life? And I think my answer is there is no one reality for a large community. The quote-unquote elites had understandings. They met and made decisions. That era was kind of blown away by the civil rights movement, where more popular grassroots energies surged up and said, no, this is not the community we want. And Durham really did become a leader in advocating for change. Not just vertical integration, but really even more substantially. So I'm curious, having seen these clips, and you're alive today, living in the 21st century in Durham, any impressions you want to share, any questions you have before I show the final clip?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that comes to mind when I see some of the stories that you're sharing is that I think one of the things that comes to mind is that hopelessness is generational. And so I think that you showed this period where there were these businesses that were thriving, and some people would say that was because of this whole institution of segregation. Right. But, you know, there was also the possibility that, you know, even if we had decided to put the freeway somewhere else, that some of those businesses would have continued to thrive. It wasn't as if integration was a death sentence. And I think that that very notion or that very thought is probably a manifestation of this learned hopelessness. And I think that when we see some of the communities in Durham today, we see a lot of the people who are in some of the more disfranchised areas of Durham. To me, it almost feels as if some of that has just continued to kind of come down since those times. Some of that thought process, some of that way of seeing life, the way that people approach opportunities is because maybe we've just kind of programmed ourselves to say, even if we do take a step forward, we're going to get knocked back anyway.
Other reactions? You're here at an institution that has tried to transform itself. The journey maybe has only really just begun. We have such a short memory about things. I think it's important to take a look at, I suppose some people would say, well, how far have we come? We have come a long way. So are you looking at how far we come or how far still to go? Anybody want to talk about life here at Duke? Do you want the mic?
I can speak on life in Durham. I mean,
I think probably for the other group downtown, they want to.
Your moment. So I'm familiar with the clip with the stand with them moving the stools downtown in the store. So looking at the clip with the highways and how they end up taking out the black businesses, it seems like history is repeating itself with the South Side Revitalization Program. So everything on the South Side was all black, has been all black for at least the last 30 plus years.
Many decades, yeah.
Right, and so then all of a sudden they came up with this right idea, we're gonna revitalize the South Side, but what they did was push all the black people out of the community, even though they're supposed to be income-based or affordable homes. They're not affordable for those people who stay in the South Side. So all those people had to leave because they were pushed out of their homes thinking they'd be able to move back in, which was not the case. So, I mean, you have houses over there now that's like $300,000. And if you go from paying like $500, $600 rent, there's no way you can afford a $300,000 house. So those people were like, I mean, I'll say not really tricked per se, but in a way it's still like history repeating itself because they came in, tore down all the houses, and they have these new houses. So it's kind of like we're not going forward because they did it in many communities, not only just Southside, but the West End and probably Northern Durham.
Or even in the communities just east of downtown.
Right.
It's amazing. Has anybody driven down Holloway Street lately? This area began as for the up-and-coming white business folks, building houses there in the 19-teens and 20s. Things went down in that community, and now, last time I drove through, it was like, wow, look at these houses. These are beautiful houses, bungalows and gardens, but where are the folks who used to live there? Where have they gone? I don't know. We can see everything that's happened in this nation in a microcosm right here in Durham. You see the Industrial Revolution and the coming of white and black farmers off the farms into factories and factory life here. Civil rights movement. I think Durham provides a nice model for. I say nice is not the right word. It provides a laboratory in a way to take a look at the social changes that have happened over here over the last century. Anybody else have an observation or story about Durham they want to share? Or about life here at Duke? I want to show you the last clip. Yes, June.
I just have one comment to share that someone shared the last time you were here some years ago, and I was seated very far back of the room, and a lady said, "I will never drive down 147 again and feel the same way," and it was just because of your film. She said, "I will never look at that highway and drive down that road and feel the same way again."
And there was an expression, I think John O. Franklin might have coined it, of is it urban renewal was actually Negro removal, because again, as Durham, as the history of Durham plays out the national scene, you look in Minneapolis and in Nashville and city after city, Atlanta. Partly because these areas had become run down, had economic challenges there, but the response of just nuking the whole neighborhood, I think, has had lasting effects that we haven't fully overcome. Let me show you the last. This is going to be a little unusual. It's some comments by the black basketball players who played in that so-called secret game, which was actually secret. So let's see.
After the game was over, we had a second game after we'd been beaten, and we split up and we played together.
We had teams with 2 or 3 black guys and 2 or 3 white guys on each team, and we played some more just for the fun of it.
Some of the guys invited them over to the dormitory, not thinking that they were going to come, you know. But every single one of them says, "Hey, fine."
So I guess I wanted to end on a little bit of a note of hope. And I do feel hope. I do feel optimism, maybe a cockeyed optimism about human nature and the power of love and the power of respect. We live in a time right now where some of those values look like they're a little shaky for various reasons, but I like to think that maybe sometimes we need to take a step back before we can move forward again and realize what we have and what's in danger of being lost in our country and in our beloved city of Durham. So thank you all. I know I'm ending a little early, but you all are heading back to your work. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Now you have questions, right? Now that we turn off the camera.